Welcome along, and we have made it to late antiquity in the army analysis series. This is the very first army for late antiquity. I've just covered classical. I think I did about 28 armies. I'll probably do a few more, but we're nearing the end there. And also with high middle ages, I think I'm about the same, about 26 armies. So now I thought I would come and have a look at late antiquity. And this army, the Roman 197 AD army, I took this out in the league a couple of seasons ago, so I know it fairly well. And I finished, I think my record was roughly 6 wins, a draw and 2 losses. I think I finished second in Division B. So I did pretty well with this army. It is a really nice army. I'll go through some of the reasons why I think that. And let's go in. And zooming, we look at these wonderful, wow, these shields look great, don't they? Roman Legionnaires. Now, in my opinion, this is my opinion, I've mentioned it to a few of my friends, and they seem to agree with me, but my feeling is that the Roman Legionnaires are actually better. They perform better in late antiquity compared to classical. Okay, in classical they still do great. Impact foot, superior quality, armoured, fantastic troops, as we all know. But in my eyes, and from when I played with this army and what I was fighting against, it seemed that these Roman Legionnaires, I mean, they just smash through warband. And I've been looking at the stats. So I've got loads and loads of stats. I'll just briefly cover a few of them. On impact, the Machimoi Pike, they're 75 up on impact. Legio Palatina, they're 34 up on impact. Legio Comitatensis, they're 84 up on impact. Warband, standard warband, they're 40 up on impact. Dismounted armoured cavalry, they're 100 up on impact. Dismounted lancers, they're 125 up on impact. And it goes on and on and on and on. They are like tanks plus, in fact, in late antiquity. There is just not that much that can face them infantry-wise. And a lot of armies, you've got to remember, in late antiquity, you've got smaller infantry armies, because quite a lot of armies have got more cavalry, less reliance on infantry, and the infantry you're facing, a lot of it is pretty poor, pretty average. Warband, a lot of warband, the Celtic warband, dismounted lancers, they really suffer on impact. Shield wall, the defensive shield wall is 150 down on impact against these guys. Imitation Legionnaires, they're in quite a lot of armies, they're 50 down on impact against these guys. Picked Scots foot even are 100 down on impact, and they're at 37 in melee, they're down. So there really isn't much that's going to beat Legionnaires. There really isn't much. Even picked warband, okay, they're 10 down on impact against your superior or picked warband, but then they're 25 up in melee. So I'd rather have the 25 up in melee than 10 up on impact, because that's only just one round. So really strong. And in melee, even in my tests, there's hardly anything that can compete, because they're superior quality and they are impact, and they're armored, I should say. So there's very few. Dismounted noble lancers, they're 25 up against the Legionnaires. Dismounted armored lancers are 50 up against Legionnaires. But again, in most armies, you're not going to get that many of those units. You've got to remember, I've got 10 here. I've got 10 Legionnaires. Most armies would only have, I don't know, 2, 3 of the dismounted lancers. So this undoubtedly is the strong point of this army. I've also gone for the base build. I think you've got Arab allies you can take out, or Armenian allies, but in my opinion they're not worth it. The Armenians, you just get a few cataphracts, and the cataphracts are not that great in late antiquity, not to rely on anyway. I'd rather have Legionnaires over cataphracts. So this is the way to go, in my opinion. When you take allies, you can only take 7 Legionnaires. And I haven't even mentioned, we've even got one of the guard units, Pretorian Guard. I mean, this is just awesome unit. Highly superior. It's just going to smash practically all infantry units. Hardly anything's going to defeat it. So infantry for this army is great. You've even got at the back hiding the so-called mediocre Roman legionnaires, and they are actually, in my opinion, I would say one of the most cost-effective units in the game, because they're average quality, but they're armored and they're impact foot. And I like the imitation legionnaires. I think they're a great price at 51, but these are only 3 more, and they are fully armored compared to the imitation legionnaires, which are only some armor. So they get their plus 25 for armor once in melee, and being impact foot, they're up 100 most of the time against most of your average infantry. So great price at 54. Definitely not mediocre. We've got some of the medium foot, the Roman medium foot, which is actually pretty good. Again, they're armored, so they get that plus 25 in melee. They're pretty good because they light spear. They're pretty good on the flanks, holding against infantry, against cavalry. They're actually pretty good against cavalry, and they can hold against infantry as well. So they are actually pretty decent. There's not that many units in the game that are armored medium foot, so they are pretty decent. So infantry is great in this list. And we've also got some mixed bow, because we don't have that many skirmishers. We're maxed at 6, so maybe some armies, especially playing the Romans, maybe they'd go a little bit heavy on the skirmishers. Maybe they'd take 8 or 9. So these are quite useful, these mixed bow units, to help out with the skirmishers. We don't have a lot of cavalry, or obviously with the Romans, because the infantry is so good, you're always at a little bit of a disadvantage. With cav, it's really just for holding the enemy up, trying to protect your flanks. To be honest, a lot of these maps with the woodland and stuff, it's actually playing into the Romans' hands, because they might well struggle against cavalry, but when you have maps with a lot of woods, if I can get to here, then it becomes harder to use cavalry with all this woodland, and it's easy to block a flank up. Or if I'm playing more defensive, if you could set your army up here, and then you've got woodland on both flanks. It's hard for the enemy to make use of their cavalry. If we did want to maybe add a little bit more cav, we could take out guard, maybe take out the javelin horse, and we could add, we got access to 1 cataphract unit, and we could take out another of the medium foot. So for 1 infantry unit, we've gained, well, we've swapped for another infantry unit, taken out the javelin horse, and we've got a cataphract. And maybe sometimes you want a cataphract just to bulk out your cav a little bit. I'm not saying cataphracts are awful, but I guess when if you've got 4 or 5 of them, then that's a lot of points to spend on these units that sometimes get stuck against infantry. But 1 or 2 can definitely be useful. So overall, a pretty solid army. I did have a look at the records. There's one player actually who's taken out this army, a friend of mine, Lynx. He just took this army out on his own. I didn't mention it to him, but and he's also heading probably close to my record. As I said, I finished on around 6 wins, 1 draw, and 2 losses from what I remember, and he's on at the moment 4 wins, 1 draw, and 2 losses. So maybe heading towards a similar record as me, but overall the record is pretty poor, which surprises me. So going up to season 11, this army is on a 38% win rate. So we'll have to compare it to other late antiquity armies. This is the first in the series, so we'll see how that compares. But that is fairly low. That is fairly low, and it does surprise me. I guess you've got to remember that when you look at the overall record, that is, that's including everyone, new players, players that have never taken this army out, average players, poor players, good players, everybody. So that's something to take into account. But still, I think 38% is fairly low. And maybe one reason is it's hard for some players to protect your army when you haven't got that many cavalry units. We don't have that many spear units. We've just got our medium foot, which is at a little bit of a disadvantage against mounted in the open. Even though they're light spear, they get that -1 modifier. So that's all we've got in terms of spear, and everything else is swordsman. And swordsman against cavalry in the open is at a little bit of a disadvantage most of the time. Although the Legionnaires, in my tests, they were doing really well against cavalry in the open. Byzantine Lancers is one example. They were 38 up in impact, 38 up in melee. Tagmatic Lancers, they're evens in melee and in impact. Roman Lancers, they're 50 up on impact, 50 up in melee. Noble Cav, they're 50 up on impact and 25 up in melee. So actually a lot of cavalry against your Legionnaires, they struggle. So it's only against Lancers, cataphracts, the better quality Lancers and cataphracts and elephants that they struggle. So for me, I would say what you really need to do is just get your Legionnaires going. They can be really a true hammer of an army. I try and get them into action as soon as I can. You don't really want to play too defensive with this army because you don't have that many skirmishes and you don't have, as I've said, that many cavalry units. So you just want to get your infantry going. That's the best way forward. My rating, I'm going to go about an A- for me. Yes, everything relies on your Legionnaires, but Legionnaires are great units. So in other armies, warband armies, it's a bit more hit and miss. If you've got a lot of warband, sometimes you're never quite sure how they're going to perform, but Legionnaires are generally, they perform well in most battles. So I think when you can bring so many of these Legionnaires, and in general, a lot of armies just don't have that much infantry that can compete. then that is a big advantage. The minus obviously is for the cavalry, and just we don't have any more skirmishers. So there's not a lot of flexibility with this army, really. We've only got Roman cavalry, which is pretty awful. You could take out some veteran Roman cav. Okay, that's not too bad. We don't have any elephants. So maybe you could take out perhaps I don't know, one of the medium. You could take out a medium infantry, and perhaps, although I do like those, maybe a slinger or something. You want to just have slightly less skirmishers, and you could take out a veteran Roman cav, and we can take 2 of those. So there we are. There's a little bit of flexibility with the cavalry, at least. But yeah, I think A minus is about right. I am surprised at the overall record. Let's see, maybe next season more players will take this army out. I think it's a great army. I think Lynx is enjoying his time with it as well. But there we go. If you've played with this army before, it doesn't necessarily have to be in the league. Let me know what you think. Maybe you agree with me. A minus is about right. If you don't, let us know in the comments below. Thanks a lot for watching, and see you again soon.